My name is Sophie Vance. I am 26 years old, and if you asked my parents to describe me in one word, they would undoubtedly choose disappointment. To them, and to everyone in our high society circle, I am the failure to launch. I am the daughter who refuses to get a real job, the recluse who spends 18 hours a day locked in her bedroom typing on a battered laptop, and the financial burden who still lives in the guest room. My mother likes to tell her friends at the country club that I am finding myself, which is just polite code for unemployed and useless. But what my family doesn't know, and what the 3 million people watching this live stream are about to find out, is that I am not unemployed. I am S.Words. I am the anonymous ghostwriter behind 5 New York Times bestsellers. I am the invisible hand that writes the memoirs of politicians, the comeback stories of athletes, and the thrillers that keep you up at night. My hobby, as my father dismissively calls it, has quietly earned me a net worth that rivals his own. But in the Vance household, silence is the only way to survive, so I let them believe I was nothing. Until tonight. Right now, I am standing in the velvet shadows of the backstage wings at the grand ballroom of the Royal Plaza Hotel. The air smells of lilies, expensive champagne, and betrayal. Out there, under the blinding heat of a dozen spotlights, sits my older sister, Tiffany. She is holding a hardcover book titled The Self-Made Woman. She is weeping elegantly, telling a room full of critics and fans about the agonizing, lonely nights she spent writing this masterpiece. The crowd is eating it up. My parents are in the front row, beaming with the kind of pride they have never once shown me. They think I am at home, probably asleep. They think Tiffany has pulled off the perfect heist, stealing my manuscript and claiming my life story as her own. But they are wrong. I am not here to watch. I am not here to applaud. I am here because the one thing a ghostwriter never does is let someone else sign their name to the final chapter. Tiffany thinks she is the author of this moment, but she has no idea that she is just a character in a scene I am about to rewrite. To understand why my sister felt entitled to steal the very words out of my head, you have to understand the brutal architecture of our childhood. In the Vance household, love wasn't a given. It was a currency, and my parents invested all of it in one stock, Tiffany. My parents didn't just play favorites. They created 2 entirely different realities under one roof. Tiffany was the golden child, the sun around which our entire family orbited. She was loud, charismatic, and effortlessly beautiful, everything my image-obsessed mother desperately wanted to be. From the moment she could walk, she was enrolled in pageants, acting classes, and modeling workshops. My parents poured their savings into her brand, convinced she was destined for Hollywood stardom. And then there was me, the shadow. Because I was quiet, introverted, and preferred books to people, my parents decided early on that I was defective. While they spent thousands of dollars on Tiffany's portfolios and wardrobe, I was mocked for asking for money to buy printer ink. I remember showing my father my first completed short story when I was 16. He didn't read it. He didn't even look at the title. He simply used the stack of paper as a coaster for his coffee mug and told me, "Sophie, get your head out of the clouds." Scribbling in a diary isn't a career. It's a symptom of being antisocial. They viewed my writing not as a talent, but as a childish flaw, a hobby for failures that I needed to outgrow to become useful. This toxic hierarchy taught Tiffany a dangerous lesson that would eventually ruin us both. It taught her that she was the main character of the universe, and I was just a supporting prop. She learned that my resources were actually her resources. If I saved birthday money, my mother would borrow it to buy Tiffany new heels. If I had a clever idea, Tiffany would repeat it at the dinner table and get the applause. They groomed her to be a thief by teaching her that my existence only mattered if it could be harvested to fuel her shine. So, when she stole my manuscript, she didn't see it as a crime. She saw it as her birthright. The heist happened exactly 6 months ago, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. My laptop charger had frayed, and I foolishly left my computer plugged into the main outlet in the living room while I ran to the electronics store. That 45-minute window was all Tiffany needed to dismantle my life. At the time, Tiffany's influencer career was stalling. Her engagement numbers were down, and brands were dropping her because she lacked depth. She was desperate for a new angle, something raw and vulnerable to rebrand herself. When she saw my laptop open, she didn't see an invasion of privacy. She saw a content mine. She guessed my password. It wasn't hard. It was the birthday of the only person who ever believed in me, my grandmother, and started digging. She found a folder named Projects. Inside was a manuscript I had been polishing for 2 years, titled Echoes. Echoes wasn't just a story. It was an autopsy of my childhood. It was a raw, fictionalized memoir about a girl surviving a narcissistic sister and negligent parents. The irony is sickening. Tiffany stole the very book that was written about her own cruelty. But because she lacks any self-awareness, she didn't recognize herself in the villain. She just saw a beautifully written tragedy that she could exploit. She didn't just read it, she copied the file to a USB drive. Within a week, she had sent it to a major literary agent, pitching it as her secret diary that she had kept hidden for years. She changed the title from Echoes to The Self-Made Woman, a title so hypocritical it almost made me laugh when I first heard it. She sold my pain as her resilience. She sold my trauma as her triumph. By the time I realized what had happened, it was too late. I walked into the kitchen to find my parents popping a bottle of Dom Perignon. "Great news," my mother shrieked, hugging Tiffany. "Your sister just got a 6-figure book deal." I felt the blood drain from my face as Tiffany looked me dead in the eye, smiled, and raised her glass. She knew I knew, and she dared me to do something about it. I didn't wait for the bubbles to settle in their champagne flutes. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a rage so hot it felt like it was burning through my skin. I slammed my own printed draft of Echoes onto the marble kitchen island, right next to their celebration bottle. "You stole it," I said, my voice trembling. "You went into my computer, you copied my life story, and you sold it." I expected denial. I expected Tiffany to feign innocence or claim it was a coincidence. But what I got was something far worse. I got a business presentation. My father didn't look shocked. He looked annoyed, like I had interrupted a board meeting with a petty complaint. He set his glass down and sighed, giving me a look of pitying condescension. "Sophie, grow up," he said. "We didn't steal anything. We repurposed a resource that was going to waste." "A resource?" I choked out. "It's my trauma. It's my words. And it's Tiffany's face," my mother interjected, smoothing her silk blouse. She walked over to me, not to comfort me, but to fix my collar, treating me like a disheveled child. "Let's be realistic, darling. Look at you. You're a recluse. You don't have the spark to sell a memoir. Nobody wants to buy a book from a girl who hides in her room. But Tiffany? Tiffany is a brand. She is giving your little story a voice it would never have otherwise. You should be thanking her." That was the dagger. They weren't denying my talent. They were denying my humanity. They admitted I wrote the book, but they believed my only purpose was to be the fuel for Tiffany's fire. When I threatened to call the publisher, the atmosphere in the kitchen shifted from condescending to dangerous. My father stepped closer, towering over me. "If you say one word," he whispered, "I will kick you out on the street tonight. I will tell everyone you are a jealous, mentally unstable sister trying to sabotage her family. Who do you think they will believe? The self-made woman on the cover of magazines, or the unemployed girl living in our guest room?" I looked at Tiffany. She was smiling, sipping her drink, safe behind the wall of our parents' protection. "It's for the best. Sophie," she said. "We're a team. I'm the face, you're the brain. Know your role." That night, I realized I wasn't their daughter. I was their employee, and I had just been given a final warning. The launch of The Self-Made Woman wasn't just a book signing. It was a coronation. The publisher, believing they had discovered the next literary genius in my sister, rented out the grand ballroom of the Royal Plaza Hotel. They organized a massive gala that would be live-streamed to 3 million viewers across the globe. It was the event of the season, and my parents were treating it like their personal victory lap. 3 days before the event, my mother laid out a beige dress on my bed, drab, ill-fitting, and designed to make me disappear. "You will attend," she commanded, checking her reflection in my mirror. "We need to present a united family front for the cameras, but do not speak to the press. Do not draw attention to yourself. You sit in the back row, you clap when told, and you leave the talking to the people who actually achieved something. I was expected to be a prop in their perfect tableau, but they had made a critical miscalculation. They didn't know that the CEO of the publishing house, Mr. Blackwood, was a massive fan of the anonymous author S.Words. He had noticed striking similarities between the prose in my sister's stolen book and my previous bestsellers because, of course, I wrote them all. Thinking he was arranging a meeting of two great literary minds, he had sent a confidential, encrypted invitation to my S.Words email address. He invited me to be the surprise VIP guest of the evening. So, when I arrived at the ballroom tonight, I didn't wear the beige dress. I wore a tailored crimson suit that I bought with my ghostwriting royalties. I didn't enter through the side door as my parents instructed. I walked down the main red carpet. I saw my parents in the front row. My father's jaw dropped. My mother's eyes widened in fury, and she aggressively signaled for me to move to the back. She thought I was crashing the party. She didn't realize I was the guest of honor. I ignored her frantic hand gestures, walked right past the general admission seating, and flashed my heavy, gold-embossed invitation to the usher. "Right this way, ma'am," he said, unhooking the velvet rope to the VIP section. I took my seat in the front row, directly across from my parents. The color drained from Tiffany's face as she watched me from the stage. She knew I wasn't there to clap. I was there to close the book. The Q&A session began as a rehearsed play. Tiffany sat on a velvet armchair center stage, crossing her legs perfectly, reciting the sound bites she had clearly memorized from the press kit my parents had bought for her. She used buzzwords like raw, trauma, and empowerment every 30 seconds, but her eyes were empty. She was performing authorship the same way she performed everything else in her life as a role to be played for applause. For the first 20 minutes, the moderator threw her softball questions about her writing routine, which she claimed involved drinking green tea at sunrise, a lie, since she wakes up at noon, and her inspiration. She smiled, charmed the cameras, and played the part of the tortured genius perfectly. Then, the atmosphere shifted. A man in the third row stood up. It was Julian Sterling, the senior critic for the Literary Review, known for eating amateur writers alive. He wasn't interested in her skincare routine or her journey. He adjusted his glasses, looked down at his highlighted copy of the book, and asked the one thing Tiffany wasn't prepared for, a specific question about the text. "Miss Vance," he said, his voice projecting clearly without a microphone. "In Chapter 7, you use a recurring motif of a bird with a broken wing trying to navigate a hurricane. You explicitly contrast the bird's instinct to survive with the storm's indifference. Can you explain the specific literary inspiration behind that allegory and how it relates to the dichotomy of parental love you explore in the epilogue?" The silence that followed was excruciating. It lasted 5 seconds, then 10. Tiffany froze. Her confident smile twitched and died. I watched her panic in real time. The color drained from her face as she realized that her charm couldn't answer this. She hadn't read Chapter 7. Honestly, I doubted she had read the book at all. "Well," she stammered, letting out a nervous, high-pitched laugh that echoed painfully in the quiet room. "The bird is, it's about flying. It's about rising above." She looked desperately at the moderator, then at our parents in the front row. "Actually, that's really heavy. Can we talk about the cover art instead? It matches my dress perfectly, don't you think?" The room didn't laugh. The heavy, suffocating silence of 300 intellectuals realizing they were watching a fraud settled over the ballroom. It was the moment the facade cracked. It was obvious to everyone watching that she didn't understand the question, let alone the answer. Sensing the absolute disaster unfolding on stage, the event moderator desperately tried to pivot. He forced a bright, frantic smile and leaned into his microphone, trying to distract the audience from Tiffany's humiliating silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice booming with forced enthusiasm. "We actually have an incredible surprise for you tonight. The publisher has just informed me that the legendary anonymous author, S.Words, the genius behind 5 New York Times bestsellers, is actually in the audience. We would love to hear their expert take on this unique literary style." A murmur of genuine excitement rippled through the crowd. I watched my parents twist in their seats, their eyes scanning the room with greedy anticipation. They were desperate to meet the famous S.Words, hoping to network, to charm, and to leech off someone else's success. They were expecting a distinguished stranger. They were expecting a savior. Then, the spotlight swept across the ballroom darkness, cutting a path through the crowd, and stopped directly on me. For a heartbeat, time seemed to suspend. Then, I stood up. My mother let out a gasp so loud and sharp it was picked up by the stage microphones, a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. She looked at me, standing in the blinding light, wearing the crimson suit I bought with my own royalties. And for the first time, she didn't see her failure of a daughter. She saw her reckoning. Tiffany's face went past pale. She looked translucent. She gripped the podium like it was the only thing keeping her upright, her eyes wide with terror, shaking her head slightly as if begging me to sit back down. But I was done sitting in the dark. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I simply walked toward the stairs. The security guards, seeing the VIP badge on my lapel, stepped aside with respect. I walked up the steps, the rhythmic click of my heels echoing like a ticking clock. I walked right past my trembling sister, who shrank away from me as if I were fire. I took the microphone from the stunned moderator's hand. The feedback whined for a split second before I turned to face the critic who had asked the question. "I can answer that," I said, my voice steady, amplified, and undeniable. "You asked about the allegory in Chapter 7. The bird with the broken wing represents me. And the hurricane? That represents the people sitting in the front row who broke it." The moment those words left my mouth, the polite veneer of the book launch disintegrated. Tiffany snapped. The golden child mask fell away, revealing the terrified, cornered fraud underneath. She lunged toward me, shouting into her headset for the production crew to cut the live stream. "She's crazy!" Tiffany screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "She's a jealous, mentally unstable sister trying to ruin my moment. Security! Get her off the stage! She's hallucinating!" Two security guards stepped forward from the wings, uncertain who to believe. My parents were on their feet, shouting threats of lawsuits. The room was descending into chaos. But I held my ground. I didn't need to shout. I had something far more powerful than volume. I had the receipt. "You can drag me off this stage," I said, my voice calm and amplified clearly over Tiffany's screeching. "But you cannot drag the truth out of the books holding in your hands." I turned directly to the audience and the cameras, locking eyes with the millions of people watching online. I am a ghostwriter by trade. I have spent my career being invisible, so I learned a long time ago to ensure my work against theft. If you have a copy of The Self-Made Woman, please open it to page 12, page 50, and page 100. A hush fell over the room. The sound of rustling paper filled the air as 300 guests, and the literary critic in the third row, opened the hardcover books. "I use a specific cipher to watermark my manuscripts," I explained, staring directly at my sister, whose face had gone deathly pale. "If you look at the third paragraph of every chapter on those pages and take the first letter of each sentence, you will notice a pattern. It isn't random. It's a signature." The room was silent for 10 agonizing seconds as the guests decoded the text. Then, the literary critic stood up, his voice trembling slightly as he read the hidden message aloud. "Property OFSOPHIE VANCE BORN MIE EDOR EJOJOBA." The realization hit the room like a physical shockwave. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. I hadn't just claimed the story. I had engraved my name into its very DNA. Tiffany stood frozen, the book in her hands feeling heavy as a brick. She realized then that she hadn't stolen a book. She had stolen a confession. And I had just forced her to sign it. The reaction in the ballroom was instantaneous and brutal. It started as a ripple of shock, but within seconds, it transformed into a tidal wave of outrage. The silence that had held the room captive shattered into a cacophony of gasps, accusations, and the frantic clicking of camera shutters. Behind Tiffany, the massive projection screen displaying the live stream chat, which had been curated to show only praise, suddenly scrolled too fast for the moderators to filter. The comments were no longer heart emojis and compliments. They were a waterfall of fury. Fraud, thief, and justice for Sophie flooded the screen in real time. The internet is a cruel judge, and the verdict was unanimous. Mr. Blackwood, the CEO of the publishing house, stood up from his front row seat. His face was a mask of cold fury. He realized in that moment that he hadn't just published a memoir. He had published a liability. He had been sold a stolen product by a social media influencer, and his reputation was melting under the heat of the stage lights. He didn't look at Tiffany with concern. He looked at his legal team and made a swift, cutting motion across his throat, the universal sign to kill the feed. But it was too late. The clips were already viral. On stage, Tiffany's composure didn't just crack. It disintegrated. The golden child facade fell away, revealing the terrified, entitled child underneath. She didn't weep with remorse. Instead, she threw the book onto the floor and screamed into the hot microphone, her voice shrill and ugly. "It's not fair!" she shrieked, stomping her foot like a toddler denied a toy. "You're ruining everything! I'm the brand! I'm the face!" When the crowd continued to jeer, she turned on the only people left to blame. She pointed a shaking finger at our parents in the front row. "They made me do it," Mom said. "Sophie was too ugly to sell books. They told me to take it." The cameras swiveled instantly from the stage to the front row. My parents, who had spent 20 years carefully curating an image of upper-class perfection, were now shielding their faces with their event programs like criminals being let out of a courthouse. They had spent my entire life trying to hide me from the world, ashamed of my existence, and now, in a twist of poetic justice, I was the only thing the world wanted to see, while they were desperate to disappear. Their reputation wasn't just damaged, it was obliterated in seconds, broadcast live in unforgiving 4K resolution. In the aftermath of the live stream, the machinery of justice moved with terrifying speed. Mr. Blackwood didn't just terminate Tiffany's contract, he incinerated it. Before the sun rose the next morning, the publisher issued a press release apologizing for the deception and announcing that they had signed a 3-book deal with the true author of The Self-Made Woman. I signed that contract not as S.Words, but as Sophie Vance. With the signing bonus, I moved out of my parents' house within 48 hours. I didn't pack a bag. I simply bought new clothes. I purchased a loft apartment downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, a space filled with light, where no one would ever tell me to be quiet again. But I didn't stop at the contract. I sued Tiffany for copyright infringement. My lawyer, paid for by my own royalties, was ruthless. We settled out of court, and I took every single penny she had earned from the pre-orders. It wasn't about the money, it was about restitution. I took back the profit she had made from my pain. As for my parents, the silence has been absolute. They sent letters at first, claiming they were so proud of my success and that they always knew I was special. They even suggested we meet for dinner to discuss how to manage my new wealth. I saw right through it. They weren't proud of their daughter. They were proud of the paycheck I now commanded. I returned the letters unopened. I finally realized that you cannot edit toxic people into a happy ending. You have to write them out of the script entirely. I spent 26 years as a ghost in my own life, letting my family dictate my worth and steal my voice. But I learned the hardest lesson of all. You cannot let others write your story for you. If you do, they will always cast you as the supporting character. You have to pick up the pen and write yourself as the hero, even if it means writing your family out of the final chapter. My name is Sophie. I am a best-selling author, and for the first time in my life, the pen is firmly in my hand. Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe in reclaiming your own voice, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to rewrite your own story to save yourself? I'll be reading your answers.